So you're probably wondering, why did it take this guy more than 3 years to build a tiny cabin? By definition, it's not supposed to be a big project, right? Am I some kind of an idiot? I've watched those other videos, like, see me build this cabin start to finish in 7 days, and I've gotten that look from the other dads at my son's Cub Scout meeting when they would ask, "So Neil, are you still working on that tiny cabin?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm still working on it." And they'd be like, So I get it. It seems like a long time. And truthfully, it really only took me maybe 7 non-contiguous days to assemble the structure and get it all dried in. I'll show you that and how it all came together in a moment. But getting to that point took some time. It wasn't delivered to me as a kit. I measured and cut everything myself. I sketched out and I built the custom front door from scratch. I also changed up the plans and added some storage compartments in the floor and a bump out for more headspace and more windows. All those things took time. And it wasn't like I worked on it every day. There were starts and stops, and sometimes for a few months at a time. And you're not going to believe this, but there was a pandemic. So right in the middle of it all, the cost of lumber skyrocketed. I was told to stay inside and wear a mask over my face. So there were other things going on and some challenges to overcome, and I had a few things I needed to figure out along the way, but I stuck with it because it's important to finish what you start, right? And to be honest, the whole process turned out to be a lot more meaningful and worthwhile than I expected. My name is Neil, and I'm sitting here in a 110 square foot tiny cabin I built in my backyard. Now, before we go any further, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking of Tommy Boy.
That guy in a little coat. That guy in a little coat.
Chris Farley did, in fact, inspire me to call this channel Big Guy in a Tiny House. I wanted to call it Fat Guy in a Tiny House, but my wife thought that was too disparaging, so I changed it to Big Guy. The good news is I identify as a much thinner, less gravitationally challenged individual, so it's all good. There's nothing weird at all about a rotund guy like myself hanging out in a tiny cabin, right? But seriously, if you're someone who lives here in the real world where I'm still fat, if you like to use your brain and your hands to build something new or fix something old or grow something big, you're in the right place. Now, before I give you the grand tour and show you the time lapse of it going up, I wanted to take a moment to say thanks to those who helped me out. My neighbor Eric gets a special shout out for volunteering to help raise the walls. Once an Eagle Scout, always an Eagle Scout. Then there's my dad Jim, who at 85, I'm pretty sure could still kick my butt if he really wanted to. He was out here pulling guide ropes and giving me his sage advice throughout the process. And of course, I should thank my family, including my girl Olivia, and my boy Clayton, and my wife Alice, who's always willing to be my set of extra hands, tolerating the sawdust tracked into the kitchen and not building her a pie cabinet. I should also thank a guy named Deke Diedrichsen. We've never actually met, but he's the one who created the plans I used to build this cabin. He's also got a couple of books, including one called Micro Shelters. Look for links to his stuff down in the description. Oh, and Deke, if you're watching, you're invited to come see it for yourself the next time you're passing through the Midwest. So a few years back, we had a pole barn that burned down. The fire department figured it was probably an electrical surge that sparked some turpentine or gasoline inside. No one really knows how it started. We used it mainly for storing the lawnmower and Christmas decorations, bicycles, things like that. And sadly, most of the paintings from my college art school days were in there too. But all in all, we were pretty lucky. Everything was covered by insurance. We only lost a bunch of stuff. It could have been worse, right? So why am I telling you all this? Well, when it came to rebuilding the barn, I found toughshed.com. They have this really great 3D configurator you can use to design a custom outbuilding to your specs. I used it to design a new barn for the depressing concrete slab that was left behind after the fire. And a few weeks later, I was amazed by how a team of just 3 or 4 guys put it all together in one day. They got here in the morning with the prefabricated walls on a trailer. It was all fully painted, ready to assemble. They worked all day, and by that evening, we had a sweet new pole barn. Then I got to thinking I could build a cool little man cave the same way. I could take my time framing the walls in the garage, then put it all together in the yard when I'm ready. Now, it might be different where you live, but when I looked into whether or not I needed a building permit, I found that anything less than 200 square feet just basically flies under the radar. Too small to bother with. So I jumped on the interwebs to search for some plans that fit the bill. And I settled on this half A-frame design with these sort of dramatic angles that appeals to my artistic side. But it wasn't going to be just an ordinary cabin, right? I envisioned something that could be dismantled someday and moved to an off-grid bug-out location, or maybe I could use it as a base camp for me and the old lady when we retire and travel the country in a van. This cabin would have heat, it would have solar power, a compost toilet. Is my wife down with all this? No. But that's something to deal with at a later date. I'm on a mission. In a moment, you'll get to see how it all came together in a little 2-minute time lapse. But first, let me take you on a little walkthrough of this place. There we go. Here's that door I was telling you about. Here we are in the great room. It's only 8 by 8. But plenty big. Here's the bump out. This whole bump out here was an addition to the plan to accommodate a wood stove, which is going to go right here. Right now I've got my Perfection kerosene heater. But the thing I like most about these plans is there's actually 3 distinct spaces in such a tiny little cabin. You've got the main room here, which is 8 by 8. This is a little 4 by 4 closet with a little escape hatch back there and a little window, little glass block window. This is also where I plan to put the compost toilet. Here's where I made another adjustment here to accommodate my belly. So let's take a crawl upstairs here. So here we are up in the loft. So you can see it's not real easy to stand up in here. Like, I'm 5'7", and I can barely make it. So it's really mainly for sleeping. Look out the skylight. Not real big, but big enough. So all in all, it's more space than it seems. Sleeping loft, main room, and water closet or closet. Again, you'll have to use your imagination. It's a little bare bones right now. But that's another reason to subscribe, see how it develops. So my dad's the best. I love that guy. He's saved my butt more than once, and I owe him a lot. But he can sometimes be a little bit of a pessimist. To give you an idea what I'm talking about, people my age might remember a television cartoon show called The Adventures of Gulliver. It's about a guy named Gulliver who gets shipwrecked on an island inhabited by these Lilliputians who are only about this big, so they could ride on Gulliver's shoulders and he could pick them up in his hand. One of these little guys was named Glum. Now, let me tell you about this guy Glum. Every time they got into some harrowing situation, he would be like,
"It's hopeless. We'll never make it. Never. We're done for."
Even as a kid, you were like, what is up with that guy? And my dad can be a little bit like that. For example, I was building the platform foundation for the tiny cabin with these big, heavy 2x12 boards. Dad would come around and I would tell him about how I was insulating it and adding storage compartments with custom built-in crates to support the floor. So I had to build the whole assembly upside down and attach these big industrial strength caster wheels and scissor jacks so I could move it around and level it on site like an RV. So the whole thing would eventually need to be flipped over. And it was pretty heavy and I wasn't exactly sure how I would do that myself, but I figured I'd figure it out. But Dad, he'd be like, "That's really heavy. I don't know how you're going to do that. You're going to hurt yourself." You know what? I got 2 big, strong nephews to come over. Bam! Flipped it. No problem, Dad. There was also the issue of the second-story loft wall that needed to be lifted about 7 feet off the ground and placed on top of the lower wall. I have to admit, I've got pretty far into this project with no idea how I was going to do that. Those 2x6 framed walls with siding are pretty heavy, and I also pre-installed the window too, because I didn't think I could lift a big 5-foot wide casement window to the second story on a ladder. So we're talking a lot of weight that could seriously injure someone if it fell. Maybe Dad was right this time. He was a mechanical engineer, and maybe he knows a few things I don't. I figured I'd figure it out. There's really two options, right? Muscle it up from below or hoist it from above. But since this cabin was going in a spot with nothing overhead to attach a hoist, it seemed like hoisting was out of the question. I considered renting a mini crane. That would have been way more expensive. Then it was like God stepped in and gave me this perfectly simple, safe, and inexpensive solution. I could use the two 15-foot tall triangular sidewalls as a gantry to lift the second story wall into place. A slow, controlled ascent using two chain hoists. So I attached a couple of D-rings to the top of the sidewalls and rigged it up, and you'll see in a minute how it ended up working flawlessly. So working on this project, I've come to realize that overcoming these kinds of challenges and finding a way to get the job done is as gratifying or more so than the building itself. And the more I think about it, if Dad hadn't scared me into thinking someone was going to get killed, then I might not have taken it seriously and thought it through. Things could have gone really bad. Maybe the fact that no one got hurt means Dad was right all along. Once again, it looks like it was Dad to the rescue. Okay, so I know it doesn't make a lot of sense for a middle-aged dad like me to spend a lot of time building a tiny cabin in the backyard. I didn't really understand it myself when I started the project, but then I was watching this interview with Victor Davis Hanson, and something he said clicked. The notorious VDH is an interesting guy because he's a product of two different worlds. On the one hand, he's this elite scholar and historian. On the other hand, he grew up on a family farm and spent a good part of his adult life as a working farmer. So he has a genuine appreciation for the intellect and skill of people who do physical work, making civilized life possible for the rest of us, as Mike Rowe would say. He also knows that having a PhD doesn't necessarily mean you're not a complete idiot. So here's what he said that helped me better understand what makes a project like this important, if not very practical. He said, I'm not trying to be romantic
or naive, but something about a person who works with their hands and they combine the mind with the body and they build or they mine or they harvest, they're grounded in reality. They know human limitations and they believe that the world is tragic and you try to do your best, and if you're not perfect, it doesn't mean you're not good.
After building a tiny cabin over the course of 3 years, I get it. Professor Peterson might add that carpenters are necessarily grounded in reality because they deal in fundamental truths, measurements, and angles. Otherwise, the whole structure will collapse.
Yes!
And no matter what your faith, that's the symbolic reason why Jesus was a carpenter.
Yes!
So working on a project like this definitely helps you keep things in perspective. It can be hard and not everything goes right. I'm aware of every warped board and jagged edge and gap in this place. But I've done my best, and even if it's not perfect, even if your barn burns down, or your cat dies, or your side loses the election, you do your best with what you've got and deal with things as they are. It's all good as long as you just keep on keeping on, right? So I'm hoping these videos will inspire you to put down the game controller or your phone, get off the couch and build something new or fix something old or grow something big. And it doesn't have to be like a cabin in your backyard. It can be over in the corner of your garage or your basement or on your kitchen table. Heck, my college roommate rebuilt a VW Beetle engine in our apartment. So here are the rules. There's 3 rules. It can't be something you finish in one sitting. If it doesn't take you 3 years, it should take you at least 3 weekends. 2, it has to be something physical, not digital. Not Minecraft, not in the metaverse. Electronics are fine, but it has to be something that exists here in real life, not code, not virtual reality. 3, it shouldn't be easy. The struggle is part of the purpose.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Overcoming problems on a project is is better than focusing on the things in life that you can't control. I promise you'll be better for it. And here's where Professor Peterson would remind us again that happiness is a byproduct, right?
Yes.
And if you think about it, you know it's true. When you aim at being happy, you almost always miss the mark. But if you aim to the side, by taking on a real challenge or responsibility, happiness just kind of follows.
Yes.
Or at least you're not so miserable when your job or your family situation or politics isn't all unicorns and rainbows. But hey, what do I know? What do I know? What do I know? I'm just a big guy sitting here in a tiny house. So here's what you've been waiting for. A look at how it all came together in my backyard.
Thank you all for being with us, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Until then, bye-bye, God bless, look after yourselves.
And please share this video with someone. Join the community over on Patreon. You know I really appreciate it.